Hello, everyone, and welcome to another EA Zoom. My name is Michelle Dench. I'm an astrologer and happy to tune in with you today. This topic is planetary dances, aspects, and phases in evolution. I really felt the calling to explore this as a means of really coming to understand some of the deeper teachings that Jeffrey Wolf Green offers in his books in Pluto. I'm specifically speaking to volume 2, because what he was teaching around the relationship between the planets, and I'm not going to apply it to personal natal chart examples in this talk today. I'm going to actually apply it to the present moment. I do have an upcoming master class tomorrow, Friday, which will be on planetary to the personal natal chart. And I also did a talk for the EA online conference on soulmates, and I focused in that talk on the relationship between Pluto, Mars, and Venus. But today I really feel like this exploration of what is happening in the present moment and how that applies to where we are in our collective evolutionary state. So I'll share the chart with you and then we can dive in. Also, just to share a little bit, so there are some detailed explorations of this on the School of Evolutionary Astrology message board, and there are also more detailed explorations of this in the Pluto Volume 2 book. But if we look at any natal chart or any chart of the present moment, we can start to work with aspects and phases by identifying what is happening in the relationship between any two planets. And you can use this for any planets with their relationship to the nodes, with their relationship to Pluto, their relationship to one another. I also have many of the asteroid goddesses in this chart. So, and I include them in my work with the natal chart. It's a really, I feel like they give important emphasis to what's happening. And we'll start just very simply with the lunar phase, right? So we have a new moon, which has been growing into a first quarter phase. That the new phase, when we had that new moon eclipse on October 14th, that is something that I kind of went into in the last EA Zoom talk where I talked about the eclipses, right? That's from the conjunction, which is 0 degrees through the first 30 degrees, 40 degrees, 45 degrees. So we're sort of at that 45-degree-ish phase. If we think about what that is, there is growing light, right? Growing illumination. And in this case, we have the sun in the sign of Libra, which is ruled by Venus, and she's in Virgo. And her ruler, her Virgo ruler, is Mercury, who's also right behind the sun right now in the sign of Libra as well, separating from its recent conjunction to the South Node and applying in a Boslamic phase to the sun. So that gives us information in and of itself, right? Mercury is right now sandwiched in between the South Node and the sun. Mercury is in a mutual reception relationship to Venus towards the South Node. And we were talking about the lunar phase. So we've got this moon in Sagittarius right now, which is ruled by Jupiter, which is ruled by Venus, and Jupiter is in a retrograde. So this to me indicates that so much of the state of mind that we are working with, the thoughts, the ideas about relationship, communication, how we relate to others, and where we find ourselves, our ideas, our values, our beliefs about relationship are in this in between. We could call it almost a bardo state of evolution, right? The in between is that we have not yet closed the chapter in our life about where we are and who we are. I don't know if you've ever, I'm really in a new phase. You've completely left behind everything that you were dealing with in a past way, and you have completely landed inside a new embodiment, and you can really look back and see like, oh, I think so much differently, right? This might be, for example, someone who's a mother, right? And they're fully in the phase of mothering, and they have a newborn child, and their life as they know it as a single person is completely gone. This particular time is not like that. It's more like you are somewhat pregnant, but you're also somewhat not. It's a very strange and liminal space that I think Mercury and also the sun, the sun being in a new phase to the south node, it's applying right now to this last quarter phase right here to Pluto. We're just a few days away from where both Mercury and the sun are going to move into. Interestingly enough, the last quarter square phase with Pluto is an interesting place to be at as well, because it sort of is like that bardo, the bardo state, but the liberation from the bardo state. Jeffrey Wolf Green, this is the last quarter phase, the 270-degree square here. The soul, having learned all there was to learn about society, having been socialized in that context, now experiences a process of repolarization of consciousness. This crisis in consciousness revolves around the tension between the soul's evolutionary accomplishments of the past and the soul's evolutionary drive forward towards the future. The intent is to begin a preliminary building of new foundations of awareness and knowledge that embrace the universal, timeless, and the absolute. The old patterns, beliefs, and cultural truths and societal values no longer serve as the map through which the individual creates social and personal meaning. What to believe, what to think, and how to relate become pressing issues as the individual begins the journey of deconditioning him or herself. And that is true. I think we can speak to that process is true both from the perspective of Mercury, the sun, right? Our solar purpose, our consciousness, our individual light and awareness is about to embark upon a complete and utter shift from the conditioned old patterns, beliefs, cultural truths, societal values will no longer serve as the map through which the individual creates social and personal meaning. The soul, having learned all there was to learn, right? From a Pluto and Capricorn perspective, we have learned all that we have to learn about what it means to suppress, to be oppressed, to be conditioned by patriarchal values by societal values and norms that are identified with being in relationship in a certain way, relating to the world in a certain way, accessing our personal truth in a certain way, being self-expressed, listening to others and communicating with others in a certain way. We sort of reached the evolutionary edge of where that is not functional for us anymore. And yet, from a Venus perspective, the discernment, the revising of our values is still undergoing a closing phase. And that closing phase is about the shedding, the purification process. That it's almost like really the humbling process that we go through when going through a process of letting go, while simultaneously realizing the things in our life that have reached their phase of completion, the things that we've built together, the things that we've grown together in, the things that we've learned together as a collective, right? About, what is it? Capricorn, Libra, Aries, and the Pluto polarity point being Cancer. So we have the cardinal cross, really, with the Pluto polarity point in Cancer, with, Mars and Venus ruling the nodal axis, Aries, Libra, the self and the individual, the I, the we, the ma, the pa, the mother, father, the masculine, feminine, all of these core and foundational structures that I often talk about. These are the blueprints, right, of our life experience. They're the sort of foundational, and we're reaching the edge of evolution where what we have created, what has been created before, is done, right? It's over in a way. It's coming to its final closing phase. And we're going to have to make changes, right? The process itself is a crisis in consciousness. Those changes fundamentally have to root within our ways of thinking, our belief systems, our ideas, and where it talks about we begin the preliminary buildings of new foundations of awareness and knowledge that embrace the universal, the timeless, and the absolute. I think that also speaks to this element of Saturn in Pisces, this element of Neptune in Pisces, right? The universal, the timeless, that square, the natural opposition to Virgo, which we just saw Venus make the opposition to Saturn in the last couple of days. The natural square that happens between the Sagittarius and Gemini axis, right? Everyone who's got Gemini placements and Sag placements has been getting these squares, right? They've been getting this activation of, okay, my beliefs, the old patterns, the map that was here for me around how I do relationship, around how I do family, around how I do vulnerability and connection, intimacy, communication. Libra can also relate to exchange, right? It's the exchange of information, ideas. It's the mercantile. It's the exchange of peace and harmony and values. It's the things that we we relate to each other in communication, and where those roadways have sort of warped and been conditioned upon old ways of being. And we can see in all of these aspects and phases, right? So anytime we're experiencing a transit, we're looking at the present moment transits, they are an accumulation of actually several different phases in relationship to oneself, right? And this would be apparent in the natal chart as well. This, if a baby was being born right now in this moment, this would be then that natal chart of the baby. It's the birth of the present moment here for us now. And we can reflect on how inside of all of us are combinations of factors of evolution in relationship to one another, right? In the same way that you are a combination of your ancestors' DNA, your mother and your father, your great grandmother and great grandfather, you're an accumulation of all the karma inside the world, right? But in the unique lens and reflection of all that happens to be in the present moment of your unique life experience, your unique soul lens. So that in and of itself creates a framework for your soul and the context of what your soul is working through. And it can be that in our lives, there are some aspects of us that are coming into this lifetime very ready, very equipped, very evolved, right? We come with certain gifts. This is kind of like the gifts of the South Node, maybe in this context, is that if we're coming into this lifetime with Libra, South Node, relational skills, like we've really done that dance of having many, many lifetimes of learning how to please others, learning how to take care of others, learning how to do the dance of, oh, I know how to meet your needs. I know how to see, I used to like consider myself really good at anticipating the needs of others, looking at a situation and knowing what other people would need from me or from the situation, right? Having a very good capability of meeting others' needs. But if that comes at the detriment of suppressing one's own needs, suppressing one's own desires, right, that might be where that roadmap has run out. And then what if we don't actually know what it's like to live or be in a relationship where our needs have been met, where our needs are prioritized, where our needs can be easily communicated and received? So there might be some aspect in this closing phase of evolution where we're having to let go of fear, anxiety, worry, overthinking, overanalyzing, over anticipating what it is that we perceive others to need from us, or the denial, right? And that is where a lot of these aspects, of evolution are going to invite us in the crisis of consciousness, the crisis of the square. We're invited into the dynamic tension of the polarity. Wow, I have to really separate myself in order to know what I need. I have to separate from the other in order to know how to take care of myself. In this way, separation can be painful. Separation can bring up entanglements, right? We have Mars and Scorpio. Separation can bring up desire. It can bring up aspects of evolution where we have fear, distrust, where we have an uncertainty around whether or not we will be able to be emotionally honest, emotionally connected, authentic, and true to ourselves or to the other, right? And that's where the perception of the separation is that we have to deny our own emotional honesty or our own needs, or deny our connection to the other, right? And this is the crisis of consciousness. We can be internally pulled in many different directions. I think a lot of the signatures of these squares, in particular with a square to the nodal axis, or where we're in this case, new phase conjunction to the south node, where there isn't a lot of evolutionary development already built into that phase. Even in this phase where we have Mars in the new phase, less than 30 degrees from the south node. Let's look at that new phase, semi-sextile. The emergence or formation of a conscious egocentric identification with the new evolutionary purpose of the cycle. Random action narrows as the individual begins to sense specific directions or experiences that will allow the realization or the discovery of the new evolutionary purpose. Right? So think about it, what random action is. It's sort of like testing the waters of connection in order to see, oh, does this impulse match? Does this impulse create? Does this impulse line up? Right? And Mars has just come in, it's already moved through very quickly. That last quarter trine to Saturn in Pisces. So there is a little bit of definition there where we're getting into, oh, I'm trying to figure out myself and really trying to find some emotional stability and ground within. But it's also so new to be in sort of the discomfort of our emotional body, our feeling body. And this transitionary bridge that we get being in, like, if we're thinking, we're go back again and again to the fact of the Pluto position being this longer term evolutionary journey. So most of the planetary aspects right now are going to be moving in these coming weeks. We have in the next couple of days, here's Mercury first, moves through the square to Pluto. Then we have the sun in the next day, which also moves through the square to Pluto, which is complemented by this moon this first quarter lunar phase, which makes a conjunction to Pluto. And so that's all really pushing on that final bridge that we're making, where, okay, the map has run out, and then the sun enters the sign of Scorpio, and Lilith enters the sign of Scorpio. We have this real new beginning around how we feel the depth of our own being, how we connect with ourselves and our emotions and our feeling body, right? That is going to be a part of a deeper alchemical process that we're going to be taken through as we're in Scorpio season. People often refer to this season as the veil being thin, the spirit world being close. I think really when we're present to the intuitive nature, when we're present to the different ways in which we recognize, oh, we can feel the spirit realms. We can feel our connection to the underworld, or, we feel more permeation, right? More permeable nature in how we're connected to thoughts, beliefs, ideas, emotions, which allows for us to experience something different. It's almost a psychedelic experience of reality, because we're no longer attached to things being a certain way. Capricorn, foundation, structure, reality being very concrete, right? Even the seasonal nature, right? Fixed sign. We have moon in a mutable sign, Saturn in a mutable sign. We are pointing, even with these elements, back to the changing nature of our evolutionary journey. It's so much is not steady for us, there's no ground beneath us in these kinds of changes. And that is very much the nature of what allows us to go through the alchemical process of change, right? We often use with Pluto the example of the caterpillar changing form into butterfly. And what happens with the evolution of the butterfly is that it has to go through a fixed dissolving process in order to go into a mutable emergence process, in order to become something ultimately completely different from what it had known before. And as we move through this phase towards the end of this year, I'm going to go through Venus, because she's going to make a trine here to Pluto. And then she's going to move into the sign of Libra and begin her disseminating phase, closing phase with the South Node. That is an important part of her process, where she's finally in her own sign after her long retrograde in Leo. And she is in a very specific phase to Mars, right? Mars, she's closing her phase with Mars. And she's going to come here to the South Node. She's going to close the phase with the South Node and open a new phase with the South Node, while simultaneously moving into the last quarter square with Pluto. Here's that last quarter square. That's going to happen in December, around December 3rd. And then she's going to enter the sign of Scorpio. We follow her journey. She comes in, she gets very close to Mars. Let's just watch her close this cycle with Mars. Right? This is her relationship to Mars, and they finally both get into the sign of Capricorn. They'll get closer and closer together. She's going to catch up and be in this Baslamic phase to Mars here in the beginning of next year, closing that cycle. Before they both enter into Aquarius. Right? And so we can really see that from an evolutionary perspective. First of all, Venus and Mars are never going to make the same. They did a conjunction to Pluto and Capricorn, before last year. They both have gone through complete cycles with Pluto. Mars is going to conjoin with Pluto first, crossing over, then Venus. And this becomes the entry point, the gateway point for our whole new Venus-Pluto cycle next year. So what we're doing right now in terms of Mars and Venus, in terms of Pluto and the South Node, in terms of Mercury the sun, every single planet, basically. We're walking through these last quarter phases. We're walking through these disseminating phases. And these are really important, you know. I'm just going to share a little bit about the disseminating phase. This is from the Pluto 2 book. The disseminating phase reflects the ongoing socialization of the evolutionary intention reflected in the new phase conjunction. Now it becomes absolutely necessary for the soul to learn everything that there is to learn about the nature of the existing society that it's born into. The consensus reality of society will already have reflected established rules, customs, traditions, laws that allow society to live together as an organized unit. The evolutionary requirement is to integrate the purpose of the original intention within society as a way to fulfill the soul's social obligations. Right? What are our social obligations? How we relate to exchange of information, right? All these things that make up the basis of reality. What is that? Those are laws, those are rules, those are governments. Those are marriage contracts and laws, right? We have Juno making her opposition to Saturn, Saturn ruling Pluto, right? All those contracts, those rules, what those things mean for us. We're moving where the possession of a woman out a patriarchal context of ownership, of financial rules, of laws and obligations relative to how we possess children, how we possess family, how a woman belonged to a man, right? Imagine all of that has moved through an evolutionary trajectory where it's no longer about a father sells his daughter to a man, but now we actually have a society that very much is about finding the one and having love and having relationship and intimacy becoming the primary focus of a relationship, and having, like a whole vision of what relationship is. And some part of the vision that society had for what marriage was and what having a family was, that has died. I mean, I went through this this workshop this past weekend with so many parents of young children ending their relationships and the karmic dynamics that happen between families and children, right? This is all the Cancer, Capricorn, Libra, Aries axis, the square, right? And so many of these relationships breaking down and ending, and people trying to find their way with the hurt and the wounds, and all of it being triggered from past family dynamics, right? And the ending of relationships, which ultimately is giving way to new forms of relationship, which is giving way to new agreements, new contracts, new bonds. All of this, we are in a disseminating phase relative to these things. We don't actually know what it's like for souls to come together in equality, in union, where it's about community and friendship, where it's about our connection and raising family together in community. And yet we don't actually know, we don't even know what it's like to be sovereign, right? Venus in Leo, sovereign individuals in choice coming into relationship. That was a big part of the whole Venus and Leo retrograde, a whole new identity, which is in opposition to that Aquarius aspect of the whole, the collective. We're still working on the social structures, the social agreements, the social values, which highly values relationship and very traditional Capricorn structures of relationship. So we still have so much work to do as a collective in this disseminating phase in order to learn how to be together in an organized unit, right? How do we raise children? How do we have family? What does marriage mean? What are relationship contracts? What are the social agreements that we live by? And how do we do that in a way that is not suppressing or denying our core needs, that is honoring of our unique individual desires, right? Aries, Libra, I, we. Together we are one. And we can see this reflected in so many different ways in the world, where old ways have kind of worn out, where people are exhausted of certain ways of living and relating. And yet we haven't quite figured out new ways. We haven't quite emerged. The new phase is such a tender, sort of dark ages of, we're in the dark ages of relationships, basically. That's kind of the way I figured. And yet the dark ages of relationship are the very fertile soil in which we start to develop a new way of relating to the past. And that's been a big part of what this square to the nodal axis is all about. The resolution node for Pluto is the south node that is ruled by Venus. The resolution node for Venus is the north node, which is ruled by Mars. So we can feel how the coming together of Venus and Mars, they're closing the gap on one another, moving what we're moving towards in the new year, is really significant in how we're learning how to be with ourselves, and how we're learning how to relate to others, and what we're learning to let go of, and what we're just beginning to begin right now. And a part of where, you know, everything is one with the other is that all of these cycles and phases are happening simultaneous. So the disseminating phase, the new phase, the first quarter square, the last quarter square, the opposition, everything that is happening in one's natal chart is happening simultaneous within the calling of the soul, within whatever, you know, cycles are coming to a close, whatever cycles are just beginning. We're also within an environment where these cycles are built upon cycles. And the wars, the pain, the struggles that we find ourselves in are all simultaneous to the new growth, to the possibilities, to the emptiness, to the growing illumination that we're also working with. And so it's hard. In some ways, we can, within the natal chart, look at and start to pick apart the various different phases. And this is something that I'll go further into in the masterclass tomorrow. But you can do this in your own natal chart. You can start to identify the evolutionary phases of development that are more strong, more present, more aware within your soul, within your own journey, simultaneous to the phases that are more infantile, right? More, I also think of these phases of development as I relate many things to the process of birth, right? There is the preconception phase, right? This applies to a woman's body and their fertility, but I think it's applicable to any of these phases, right? They consider a woman pregnant 2 weeks prior when she is in her pre-ovulation, right? So that the 40 weeks of pregnancy is actually counted from the last menstrual period. It's actually the end that counts as a part of the beginning. Interesting, right? The end is a part of the beginning. We can't have the beginning without the end. It's actually a part of the whole phase of evolution. And it's not usually until we're at, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks, right? Where the pregnancy, usually where the pregnancy starts to begin, that it's even apparent that something's happening. But that something was happening before, well, frankly, I mean, you were an egg inside your great grandmother, right? That's how far back. That's Pluto in Capricorn. The egg of evolution is inside the great grandmother, great grandfather. The seed of evolution is already present long before the evolutionary moment of conception occurs for you as a soul. And then the conception for you as a soul automatically has within it the present moment reality of you as you are listening to me right now, which contains within it the evolutionary intention of your entire lifetime as this soul within the imprint of your natal chart, right? That's how complex we are, my friends. And so we're all doing the best we can to understand why we came here, what we're working with, and within the larger context of what all souls are working with, right? And it's all so unique and different. The child who's experiencing, their imprint of life right now, wherever they are, is not the same as the adult who's here right now, but yet we're all contained within the same universe, within the same cosmos. And we all ultimately return to the same source, that which we came from. And I just recently learned of a spiritual teacher who I deeply respect, who returned to her source. And her passing was done with such incredible peace and ease. And it just I was like, wow, I really want to die that way. Like I really want to go out just kind of trusting this whole lifetime and all that. I imagine her soul really finding so much peace and completion with the body that she had been given in this lifetime, and how that is a part of what allows for each and every one of us to really come into, the more we are at peace with who we are and what we are and what we're learning and what is completing in our life, the more we give way to the natural evolution of what is yet to come. And that is the kind of complex nature of where these evolutionary phases, I think, are so beautiful and so profound, because they can point to where we as souls are coming into our own knowing of ourselves, and where we as souls are also disconnected from the truth of who we are. And we go through this dance, through this phase of growth that sets in motion certain lessons, certain relationships, certain cycles, where as a part of those cycles, we get to become more and more of our true nature, more and more of ourselves. We get to discover who we are more fully, right? And so I use these phases, and more and more I'm beginning to really find how helpful they can be. Maybe we can put a link to the evolutionary phases discussion that's on the old school EA message board. I have that link here, and I can give that as a way to just take this information and begin to apply it to your own natal chart, and begin to apply the place where we are as all souls on this planet at this time. We are in a very significant phase of evolution, right? We are experiencing the kind of last throes of the patriarchy, of the Pluto and Capricorn phase of evolution beyond November 2024, beyond basically next year, we will never experience this cycle ever again in our so we're experiencing the end of the end like never before. And the souls that are on this planet are the ones who are giving birth to the next 248 years of evolution for all of humanity. That means that we have a collective, significant amount of responsibility, right, to evolve. And the more consciously we can bring ourselves and our choice and our free will and our agency into that evolution, into the individual stories in our own lives, into the individual relationships and how we relate to ourselves, the more powerful and empowered we can be as souls to claim the vulnerability of where we are right now, to claim our agency of where, oh, we want to know what it's like to evolve in this lifetime, and to be setting up the next phase of evolution where we truly get to be in relationship to one another in a new way, right? That's the square, that's the crisis, that's the skip step in a way, because we have to evolve in order to be able to live. Like, evolution is not an option, my friends. It's just a happening. And our relationship to our free will, to our choice, and to our agency is what makes it either cooperation or resistance. And this, I think, is the core of our work at this time. So thanks so much for listening to this. Please, as always, I love to hear your comments if there's something that touched you, or if there's something that you're learning or working on within your own life. And it's always a joy to really understand more about your experience. And I appreciate so much. You can always get in touch with me personally at astrologywithmichelle.com if you want to be connected. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Michelle. We'll put links to your contact information and to the message board in the description of the video.
Thank you.
Thank you.